season 4 of the Gentleman of Style Show. I'm Baldwin.
And I'm Creech, and I'm glad to be back. What about you?
I'm excited.
You excited?
I'm excited, man.
If you're excited, I'm excited. Because we've been gone way too long.
Way too long.
We've been gone too long. But we got some things done while we were gone, so that's the big thing. So we're going to jump right into the first show, this 4th season that we've got here, man. Let's do this thing. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to do it. So our first guest she's renowned, she's educated, she's one of those people that you just got to sit down and talk to. So we did. So our first guest on the Gentleman of Style Show today is Dr. LaVoulle.
Excellent. All right. Pleasure to have you here.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Yeah. Let's do this.
I like to sit beside a beautiful woman.
See how you do? See how you do? See, this is what I have to deal with.
Yeah. So, Doctor.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you a native of Atlanta? Are you a transplant? Where are you from?
I'm originally from New York, from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn.
Yes, all day, every day. But I've been in Atlanta, or at least in the Atlanta area, since the Olympics.
Okay.
So I feel like, I'm a Brooklyn peach.
Oh, a Brooklyn peach.
Hey, that's new.
That's a nice twist.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's actually will make a nice drink. Brooklyn peach.
That would be nice.
Sounds flavorful.
Yo, make that happen. Come up with that. We're going.
Hey, now I don't have the mixologist skills. Maybe we'll have someone on the show that can show us how to do that.
That sounds like a
You
good
gotta
idea.
do that.
Yeah.
So, in getting to the Ph.D., what is your Ph.D. in?
Teaching and learning with a concentration in reading.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Now, that's big.
Okay.
Now, how did you get into that field? I'm guessing did you always want to be a teacher? Let's start with that.
No.
Okay.
I wanted to be a sharpshooter for the CIA and a ballerina.
Really?
You know what?
Oh, how did you? Okay. How did you get there? I mean, what led you to the sharpshooter ballerina, which is a crazy mixture to me? But go on. Explain.
Well, I like dance. I studied at Alvin Ailey as a young person. I did modern and jazz for many years, up until the birth of my children. Okay. And I still like dance. But I realized a long time ago that the ballerina piece for me, it probably wasn't in the cards. So I kind of put that to the side as a career move. Right. In terms of being a sharpshooter, I don't know. I was always just really interested in shooting, even though I do not own a firearm today. But that was just an interest of mine back when I was studying criminology mainly. But I ended up teaching a roundabout way, but I had the opportunity to get my teaching certification at the University of Stony Brook, or State University of New York at Stony Brook.
Okay.
And that was through the Teacher Opportunity Corps, which I am forever grateful for that organization, because without them, I'm quite sure I would not be an educator today.
How does that work?
Well, they support Black and brown faces in the classroom. Okay. And they provide financial support, emotional support, and any other type of support. And I don't know if it's just through the SUNY system in New York or there are other locations, but of course I went to a SUNY school, so I can only speak about my experience. But the organization was state funded, and it gave us an opportunity to reach that goal. For example, for me, they provided me with a vehicle to be able to do my student teaching. Oh, wow. And I did my student teaching in Brentwood, Long Island, and there's no way that I would have been able to get to the location of the school without that assistance. So something as simple as that would have been a barrier that may have prevented me from being a certified educator today.
So is that an organization that you have to reach out to, or do they recognize you and they come for you and invite you?
I think I was invited in, but I think it's open to anyone at the time, and I think this is still the case. Stony Brook did not have a Department of Education. Okay. So in order to get a certification, you had to, for example, I'm a sociology major. I majored in sociology, and education courses were additional, like a minor, basically. So it wasn't the easiest path to take to be able to study education in at Stony Brook. I don't know about other universities in the SUNY system, but somehow they still provided enough courses for us to be able to attain certification. And that organization just pretty much filled in that gap so that whatever might have been a problem or a hindrance is no longer an issue, so we can still become wonderful educators today.
I mean, that's absolutely wonderful, because
Yeah.
I think that's what happens in education. People want to do things, but the barriers start to, get created, and they start to build up, and it's kind of like you have to change directions because where you want to go, you just don't have the resources to get there. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah, and having that support system around you. You mentioned they gave you transportation to
Yes.
and from as well.
Yes.
See, that's almost unheard of.
Yeah, it is. It is, exactly, because, and I mean, so pretty much on Sunday night, I would pick up my car, I would drive it all week, and then on Friday night, I would turn it in, just me.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It was
Wow.
a Ford Taurus, blue. And I was a brand new driver. I had just got my license.
Oh,
So
wow.
I learned to drive in the Long Island snow by myself, going to do my student teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you mention earlier that you had kids?
I do.
How many kids do you have?
I have young adults.
Young adults.
I have two, Jordan and Summer Robinson,
Okay.
and they are absolutely wonderful. Summer is a filmmaker here in Atlanta. She
Really?
attends Agnes Scott. She's a senior. And Jordan is a very integral member of Habesha. I don't know if you are familiar
Not
with
familiar.
Habesha.
Habesha.
Habesha. Helping schools at home and abroad. And they are a wonderful organization here in the Atlanta area and other locations too, but primarily here in the Atlanta organization. And they do everything from green works, urban farming. My children participated in their program called Black to Our Roots back in 2013, 2014. And it is a rites of passage for black children, basically. And my children were able to study and learn about our contributions globally, not just African Americans and what we did here, and certainly not picking up the story from slavery on. So they were able to learn wonderful things through Habesha, and the culminating activity was a month-long trip to Ethiopia and Ghana. So they were able to go back to the continent before their father and I have been able to, and it's, we're forever grateful for Habesha, and my son remains very active with their organization to this day.
Let me ask you a question surrounding that. Is that pre-collegiate, or is it something they can get engaged in like from the high school level? How is that?
So at the time, I think both of my children were in high school at the time. And I think for Black to Our Roots, you have to be at least 12 or 13 years old. I'm not
Okay.
quite sure, because in order to travel abroad, you have to
Right.
have a certain level of maturity.
Correct.
And it's not just the travel, that's the culminating activity. In order to even travel, they had to earn their
of
place to
passage.
go. Right, so they had to earn their fee also to attend. It wasn't just, my family giving them money to go. They had to do everything from create a product to sell. They had to do car washes, just a number of things as a group, the group of the children who were traveling in order to go. So, but Habesha has a number of different organizations, and I wish I can tell you what they all are, but
Trust
they
me.
have organizations for adults as well, and that's what my son. So he was a child with Black to Our Roots, but now he is an adult because he's an adult now, and he's working with their Greenworks division.
I'm going to do some research on that.
Absolutely. I'm
That-
sitting here thinking the
You
same
should.
thing.
I had-
Sean Myers,
yeah.
that's who you want to find out about.
Right.
Yeah, because I hadn't heard of that program.
And is this a local Atlanta organization?
Yes.
It is.
They're here in Atlanta.
Yeah, we need to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. See, this is good information.
Good.
And this is why we do this.
This
show.
is why we do this show.
Because a lot of times if you don't share information, or you're not seeing, it's easy to pick up, Facebook and Instagram and see great pictures and stories about people doing all types of crazy stuff, but we don't always get a chance to just pick up and say, oh, and start looking at a story and find out all this good information that we really should know.
And then the way the algorithms are written in these social platforms, how would that even pop up?
Right.
I mean, as far as your casual search, I couldn't even see that really popping up. And I do a lot of informational searches and everything like that. That's never popped up.
You probably, if you were looking for urban farming,
Right.
green works, because the program that my son is in is actually called Habesha Works now, and basically adults who want to learn about sustainability, how to feed yourself if
Right.
and when something should happen to our food supply.
That's important.
So absolutely,
That's
and
important.
that's what they do. They teach you how to do that, and many other things, but that's the crux. So if you were doing those type of searches, they would probably pop up.
Let's get back to your journey to the PhD level.
Yes.
So we're teaching.
But before you go there, your kids, how much of effect did they have on you as far as where you're at today?
They were everything in making that decision. For example, you were asking about the PhD journey. That was their journey too. I'm quite sure they
Right.
will tell you about the days and nights. My son, when I was an assistant principal, he was an elementary school student in the school next door, coming to my school, waiting for me to finish that job, and then coming with me to Georgia State, sitting inside or outside of my class while I took, my classes year after year after year, every Sunday being in the Barnes & Nobles that was on Camp Creek Parkway while I was working on my dissertation. So they were absolutely a part of that. And my ex-husband at the time being, supportive to give me that free time to be able to study and concentrate and work and grow. But they got a little piece of that degree, and they helped motivate me in many of the things that I've done. I was able to travel to the UAE for 2 years, and that's absolutely because my children were doing what they were put here to do. They weren't out of order, in other words. So that gave me, and my family network gave me the support to say, okay, now is the time that you can go and do this live this dream that you wanted. But has everything to do with who they have become as young people.
Now, do you see yourself, your journey, do you see it in their journey now? Like the way you approached your journey, do you see it in the way that they're approaching their journeys?
I think they have it easier in a sense. I grew up in New York, and in New York, children in New York do a lot early, from riding the train by yourself, coming home, my children didn't have to do those things. We made it so that they could just be children.
Right.
They weren't pushed into adulthood. But by doing so, they have been able to excel, soar way past their father and I in terms of things that they have done. So I think their journey is different, but it's good. I'm so proud of who they both are. My son took a direction that I wasn't expecting. I thought he was going to be working on Wall Street. I would have put money on him being an investment banker, absolutely. And now I'm pretty sure he's going to, at least right now, it looks like he's going to really excel in this urban greenery, industry. And I didn't see it coming. But, he's doing so well. My daughter, I have no doubt that she's going to make amazing films and documentaries. She's already doing so. And that relieves pressure, as a parent. That relieves pressure.
You don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
I still worry about
That's
it.
that's a mom and dad's job.
Oh,
You gotta
my
worry
baby.
about it.
Well, yeah, I get that, but you understand what I mean.
The worry is different.
Right.
The worry
Right.
is different.
Absolutely. Right.
So with your PhD, how did you decide what you wanted to do as far as your dissertation and the direction you wanted to go?
That's a good question. I had a mentor who helped direct almost every decision until his transition, and his name was Dr. Bill Hammond. And I started out as a language arts teacher in a middle school, and then he encouraged me to become a reading specialist. I did so. He said, I see leadership potential in you. I became a school leader. I became an assistant principal. And right around that time, he encouraged me to take the work that I was doing with teachers in the classroom outside of the school, and he kind of pushed me into professional development. And after some years of doing that, he said, "You know what? I think you should get into curriculum and instruction." And I listened and I applied to Georgia State. I applied to UGA too, but I decided to go into Georgia State's program. And that was a long journey because I was an assistant principal the whole time. And a lot of people are and probably should be pursuing doctoral degrees full time.
Right.
And certainly they shouldn't be administrators trying. It was a
Trying
lot.
to juggle, yeah.
It's a lot because those are two beastly tasks. Not to mention, I was a mother of two wonderful children.
Right.
But somehow I did it, and my program, I was acting as an administrator. I was a school leader, but my program was content based. So it allowed me an opportunity to look at teacher prep programs and what was happening when they leave as an administrator, but then have an insight into that development from a scholarly, level or perspective because I had that research background, if that makes sense. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That is, it's amazing to think about what you just said, being a mother, getting a PhD, and then having to administer. So what grade level were you?
Middle school and high school.
Oh God, that is that's a lot, because we talking about
Yeah.
young, formidable kids that are just starting to figure out themselves and they know everything. So you got to deal with that, and you got to deal with your own kids, and then you got to get on the, you got to sit down and kind of shut everything out and then get to work.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing. I applaud you. That is absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Can we talk about the
LaVoulle
LaVoulle group?
Yes.
Let's talk about the LaVoulle group.
Sure. Okay, so for the last 10 years, I've been providing professional development for teachers.
Okay.
And my original name, I've had two name changes. The original name was Precious Cargo Educational Services.
Okay.
And I changed to Read, Write, Rhyme Institute because I was focusing on using hip hop into pairing hip hop with the teacher pedagogy. And that was a big center of my work. But I changed the name to the LaVoulle Group because of where I wanted to go. I felt like the first two names were really where I was currently performing. And the LaVoulle Group is more of the direction that I intend to go in. LaVoulle is my last name. And there are not a lot of LaVoulles.
No.
So that in itself, I felt like was an advantage to say, you're going to remember that. It's not a name, it's not Robinson, it's not Stewart, it's not Johnson. It's a name that you're going to say, oh, wow, where's that? Is it French? That's usually the second question that I receive after, how do you pronounce your name? Then, is it French? And I like that. I like that conversation. If you Google LaVoulle, you're only going to find one other LaVoulle, and that's my mom. So I felt like that would give me an advantage as far as my company. But the LaVoulle Group focuses on providing professional development for school leaders, for principals, for teachers, and for school counselors. So we basically provide support in the form of social emotional counseling. We provide classroom management strategies, content-based support. We use hip-hop culture, popular culture in general, hip-hop culture specifically, to help engage students, to help them listen first so that the teachers can focus on the learning. Right. So it's a wonderful work since I've been working with teachers in elementary, middle, and high schools here and abroad. I really have a soft place in my heart for them. Even though I have been an administrator for a very long time, I get it. I get the struggles that they go through every day. I know how hard it is. I see it. I've been there, to be unappreciated, feel like, you have such a daunting task. And then I also, because I'm connected to your university, see that sometimes they're just not prepared. They didn't know what was about to happen, and they are just getting slammed left and right. And so the LaVoulle group helps them out. That's
Okay.
what we do.
Let me ask you this. From a development aspect, and you mentioned hip hop. How did you reason that out to develop that conversation or the process, the teaching process? I mean, where did it come from? What was the origination?
So I think I mentioned that I was initially a reading specialist. So my job in the reading lab was to work with students who were 2, 3, 4, 5 grade levels behind in terms of their reading comprehension and abilities.
That's extensive.
It is extensive, but they sit in classrooms every day. And part of that work, I was given a number of resources from my system, and the students weren't engaged with any of them. I mean, I was trying to teach them, get them to read Anne of Green Gables. Even the Watsons go to Birmingham, typical things that teachers have to teach. And they just, they were not interested.
Yeah, they had no interest.
And so I was just, beating my head against the wall, like, how do I get these kids involved? I love hip hop. I went to high school in the Bronx. I thought I was a B girl. So it's something that I was interested in. So I basically started sharing my interests with them. And they were sitting on the edge of their seats. I had them. I realized, hey, this is a hook. I'm talking about Run DMC. They don't even know anything about Run DMC. That's not part of who, but they were interested.
Right.
And then I just started to build on that. And so when I was doing that in my own practice as a teacher, and had tremendous success, and now I can get you to read Anne of Green Gables because I'm pointing out for you and helping you see how this is related to some element of the hip hop that you listen to, or how it's close or similar to what I experienced. And so it just grew from there. And when I decided to go back to school and get my Ph.D., I knew immediately I wanted to do something with hip hop. I didn't know what, but I wanted to do something with hip hop. So my dissertation is such a wonderful thing. I'm so proud of that work. But my dissertation really focuses on hip hop identity. I wanted to help people see that people sometimes maintain a hip hop identity even when they have PhDs, even when they are dentists and attorneys, and whatever capacity.
How so?
They still listen to the music. They still go to the concerts.
Right.
They still, live that life. And on their off time, they dress in a way that they feel like, represents the culture. So we still see it. It isn't something that, when I went to college, I stopped listening to hip hop. There are some people who, they're 50, 60 years old, they're still rhyming. So I knew that instinctively, and so with my research, I really set out to kind of unpack that a little bit more. So I wanted to pull together different groups of people that maintain a hip-hop identity and get them to speak. So I'm an educator. I knew there were educators, so I brought in educators. I wanted to also speak to people who were in the entertainment, who were actually rappers or producers or DJs. So I brought them in. And then I also brought in a number of entrepreneurs because I knew that quiet as it's kept, entrepreneurship was very much a part of hip hop, from, selling tickets to parties to, FUBU to all of these other things. So I spoke to entertainers, artists, entrepreneurs, and educators throughout my dissertation. And that is one thing that eventually became a book that I wrote,
And what's the name of the book?
Well, it's called Read, Write, Rhyme Institute, Entertainers, Educators, and Entrepreneurs Engaging in Hip Hop Identity. And I had a number of notable Atlanta members of the hip hop community. T.I. is featured in the book. He actually granted me my very first interview. I had never done an interview before, and I have a really old, not so good interview with him where he's sharing his educational experience with me. Killer Mike is heavily featured in the book, and if you know anything about Killer Mike, you know he's very outspoken and he is very opinionated on.
And I enjoy. I didn't mean to cut, but I enjoy hearing that guy talk.
He's a wonderful. He is absolutely wonderful, and he lent his voice to my work and shared his thoughts about education a number of times. And Jason Jeter from Grand Hustle, of course, shared with me his thoughts. So I was able to pull in all of these different people and sit them down and have dialogue repeatedly about what they thought about education today, what they thought about youth today, and the direction, and what's good and what's bad and what we can do. And that's what my dissertation was about.
So what do you think of hip hop today? Just get, because I know kind of what the background probably was for you, because I'm from that era and I understood that hip. So what do you think about the evolution of it today?
I don't know. I think it doesn't have the same effect on me as it did, then. But I think that more than anything, I am so impressed with what has happened with the culture. The way artists are able to invent and reinvent themselves, through social media platforms. I don't know if I'm absolutely in love with some of the sound that I hear. I can't say that I'm in love with it, but there are some artists, there's one local Atlanta artist. I love her work, Shirok. I think she is, that's probably somebody you want to know too. She is local here, and she is all about female empowerment, and I like her work. So I like artists like that. But, hip hop, for me, I'm more of a observer. Before I was up close and personal in the culture, but now I'm more of, a storyteller about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing that I always talk to people and they say, well, this music that ain't really this, but it's an evolution. I remember when, we were listening to hip hop and, our parents were looking at us like, what are you listening to? So sometimes when the culture changes, it changes because of the people that's running the culture, so to speak, or the people that are, prevalent, the big names that are there in the culture. So, there are pieces of it that I still love in terms of some of the music is great. To me, it's not what I'm used to with the old school, Big Daddy Kane and those guys, but neither was Ice Cube and those guys after the fact. So it's just an evolution. I look at it now, some of the music I think I like like you said, more of the cultural part of it, not so much what they're saying or the actual, the content, because some of it is, is great, and then some of it is, but that's like in any other, in our era, some of the stuff that people were dropping, you like, nah, I'm not listening to that. So I can say I'm still a fan of the hip hop culture. I love hip hop, but I just know it's an evolution, so it's a different type of hip hop.
Right.
Doctor, racially, are you seeing anything racially that's like impeding the advancement of what you've started here, or does it blend well and move?
That's a great question. I think it blends well and moves. I just did a presentation at the National Youth at Risk Conference, and I participated on a town hall panel and then did a session, and we were talking about the fact that most of the teachers of Black and brown children are white middle class women, and most of them are interested and ready to hear and engage in conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. They're open. They want some help. They want some conversation and some tools. They don't want to be isolated, but they also realize that they don't really know how to interact and engage and support the students that they teach. So I think there's a lot of room for growth, and there's a lot of willingness to really think about new ways and new approaches than
That,
before.
that brings up another question. You have different communities, and different communities, they have different cultures inside of these communities. So from back to the racial thing, is it like a hindrance if you didn't grow up with that type of background in order to implement the processes that you've created?
No,
Okay.
because I'm working with teachers in rural Georgia
Okay.
who look almost whatever you think the opposite of me would look like.
Understood.
They are able to use these same strategies and have success.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so for example, the Teaching with Diversity and Cultural Competence in Mind book that I just wrote, and that is available, the other book is not available. Teachers were grabbing it, and when I come to the school, that's exactly what I do. I show you too can do this with your students, and we're not just talking about hip hop. In that particular book, I use all types of music,
Makes sense.
different genres. So
Makes sense.
the only thing that's not in there is gospel, and that just was brought to my attention by a teacher who had gone through the book recently, and I said, "Oh, that's just an oversight.
Right.
Next time I write something, I'll add some gospel music in there too." So
Absolutely.
they're able to do it as well,
Right.
and get great results from their students.
Right.
Now, speaking of the gospel part of it, would, just as a question, would you think, or would there be any pushback because of, religion in school is always a hot button topic. So do you think,
That's a good question.
adding that in there, would that be a problem, or have you?
I don't think so, because you're not talking about religious doctrine. You're talking about music, and music being that universal language. So I can think of some songs that argumentatively could be considered gospel music, but is labeled as R&B. So
Kanye, Jesus Walk.
Exactly. So you could, and that hip hop too, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's in the selection.
Okay.
And what you say about the text. So if I go in there and I'm preaching a sermon, that may raise some questions.
Right.
But if I'm using it, we're analyzing what this author, the writer,
Right.
songwriter said. What does this mean? How does this relate to, mutualism in science? How does this relate to geographic movement of
That's no different
peoples?
than music appreciation.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Except what I do with teachers is it's always going back to the content. It's not just music for musical sake. It's not just entertainment. It's instruction.
Right. The other question that I was going to ask you, in terms of that, when you look at, I guess you would say, when you're looking at hip hop, and then you're pairing it, because hip hop mainstream, you have hip hop mainstream, and then you have, I guess, what we still call underground hip hop. What do you find, or do you find either or works, or do you find one works better than the other?
For
When-
working with teachers,
Right.
it depends on the crowd. So if I'm working in a rural South Carolina school, I probably would tend to be more mainstream.
Okay.
If I'm working with a crowd of teachers, particularly pre-service teachers, which means they're still in school, college age students, then I probably would use more underground artists to feature. It really depends on what I want. In the session that I just completed, I don't think I used maybe one mainstream artist, and that was Macklemore, a white artist. But for the most part, I think I introduced someone new to the crowd, and it was probably a mixed crowd. 50% were African, maybe 60% were African American, and they were very familiar with hip hop, and the rest were, novice, I'll just say. And a lot of the music that I introduced to them was new to everyone in the room. And I like that. I like when it's new. It's like, okay, well, that gives you something, write that down, And that's just more engagement, because if you like what you heard, then you'll find out, a little bit more about it. Just like if I mention a book and you're like, oh, well, that's a topic I'm interested in, you write the author and the books, the title of the book down.
Co-teaching. Now, is this right in line with what we've already been talking about, or did this come from somewhere else, or something that you saw that needed to be enhanced in
The
some
work
way?
that I do with for co-teaching.
Well, I've looked at some of your stuff,
Okay.
and I noticed the co-teaching, and you try to make it to whereas you have one party over here, but you want the other party to be in sync with the
Absolutely.
other party. Can you give us a
Absolutely.
little bit
Sure,
more
I
about the
can.
co-teaching?
So, in every school, everywhere, there are students with disabilities, students who might have a learning disability, behavior disorder, a number of disabilities. And the goal is for them to be mainstreamed into regular classrooms.
Right.
So, when they're able to do that, typically there's a support teacher, a special education teacher, who enters into the classroom that student is in. So if you have a class of 30, you may have 25 general ed students and 5 students who are students with disabilities. So you'll have one general education teacher, let's just say an English teacher, and a special needs teacher. And the idea of co-teaching is for both of those teachers to teach, not one teach and one just help out sometimes.
Right.
So what happens in classes, what typically happens in classes is the general education teacher and the special education teacher don't work as effectively as they could. Therefore, students don't get the full benefit of having 2 teachers. It's almost like there's still just one teacher and a visitor sometimes. So with my co-teaching matrix, I work really, really hard in helping the teachers plan together. You know what you're going to do, and you're clear on what you're going to do and when you're going to do it and why you're doing it. And by providing that structure and that support, teachers are usually much more effective and comfortable with each other. As an assistant principal, I've had to literally referee teachers where they're actually fighting physically, because this is a small space and teachers tend to be territorial.
Yeah.
This is my room. This is, this,
Yeah.
don't come in here. So, we have to work through that. We have to massage that sometimes in order to help the children, because that's why we're ultimately here. So, the co-teaching is a big selling point for a lot of schools, because they know that if they can get increase in their students with disabilities, everything is going to blossom. Everything is going to blossom. It doesn't matter if we're talking about focusing on English language arts or math or science and social studies. If you can get those students with disabilities to increase, you're going to have success in your school.
Wow. That's outstanding.
With that being said, one of the things I know that we, when we talk about enhancing the educational piece, well, the other piece that Bo and I sometimes talk about is what happens when these students get ready to leave high school and transition into college. And one of the things that I found from, just my younger years, and I see with students, is the ability to be professional and understand that you're going to have to be professional at some times. So is there any curriculum that's being paired with what you do to kind of get these young people to understand that, okay, you're going into college, you may want to have at least, one professional outfit that you may have to wear it 25 times, but differently. But you have one professional outfit that you want to have. You want to make sure that you're starting to work on your resume if you don't already have that done, because all these internships that you have the ability to get, it becomes extremely competitive, and a lot of kids don't even have the foundation to start working toward those things. So is there anything that you're seeing?
So I know that here in the Atlanta area, there's a woman, Miss Deborah Neely, who does that work.
Okay.
She works very exclusively with getting students ready for college and post-secondary options. And as you mentioned, that is more than just college essays. That is understanding how to show up at the interview. That is taking certain courses to be able to look better to college recruiters. That just is a number of things. And it can and sometimes does include knowing what to wear and how to prepare yourself and articulate yourself and sell yourself in those situations. So she is one person I know that's doing that. My work is a little different, but it can support people who are really focused on that job of getting students ready for post-secondary.
Okay, I think you actually answered the question that I had. Yes. I was going to ask you about, and this is a conversation we had about a year or so ago, about communication. Most of the time, we're so involved with our mobile devices, our cell phones. We're talking to people, back and forth, and especially the younger people. This is like really ingrained into their life, and this is how they communicate. And it's not that one-on-one, face-to-face social aspect. And we were having a conversation about it was actually a real life situation where he was at an event and the gentleman wanted to get into law school, I believe. And one of our friends sits on the board at one of the schools. And Preach actually asked him or told him, you should go over there and engage with this guy in order to, get more information, to get a leg up, put a face, with the name, and, gather that information and could, help him on his way. And I believe at the time, if I'm telling this right, if I go wrong, correct me. The guy, I think he went over to speak, and he only spoke for maybe a brief moment, maybe I think my name is such and such, and that was like basically the limit of the conversation. He did not know how to engage, socially in order to, get past and form that relationship. But it sounds like you may answer my question. This is something that Miss Neely, this is what she does.
Yes, that's
Okay.
part of what she does. And I think that there's a large need because if your parents don't teach you, your community doesn't teach you, if you have a religious affiliation, you're not, learning it there, that's not part of the school curriculum.
No.
No, it's
It's
not.
not part of the, just like cursive. Is that just not, it's only so much that the school can really provide. And that is not one thing that really comes across. So you could easily graduate and be quite awkward,
Yeah.
have
Yes.
no social graces,
Right.
no soft skills, not really know how to do simple things that people take for granted. And I'm trying to remember, well, how did we learn? But it was at home, you saw, and then you saw adults doing adult things.
Right.
And so you picked up on, okay, this is what you do. This is, but if the adults that children are around aren't doing those things, I would think it would be challenging sometimes for them to know how to govern themselves.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm finding. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and what I observed as she grew up, just observing her friends, they're in this. I'll actually call it somewhat of a matrix. They're in this matrix of understanding. They know, okay, I've got to get good grades. I've got to go to school. I may even know that I need to get a part-time job. I know I have to have certain things for college, but they don't think about the other aspects of education is one piece. What do you do when you go to sit down and get this job? You have to talk to someone. You don't just give them your resume and sit there and say, oh, you're hired. So you have to be able to engage. You have to be able to, like you said, sell yourself. You have to be able to, and one of the things I've learned in interviewing and being on the other side and actually having to interview people is, I like to interview somebody, and not in this setting, but when you're interviewing people for jobs, I like when that particular applicant basically interviews me as well. So, and I learned that a long time ago when if I'm interviewing for a job, I'm interviewing that company as well because I need to know, yes, I want the job, but I need to know that your particular company, can fit my set of skills, that, there's upward mobility or whatever else I'm looking for. So as I talk to young people here and there, I see this, I don't know, it's almost like a break in I don't want to say reality, but they just don't see that other piece. They just think, well, I get good grades, so the rest of it, it'll take care of itself, and it's not. And that's one of the things we're really trying to put together is a good program. And I know a lot of times for us, we focus on young men of color because that's what we are, and that's where we came from. And I know the traps and the ups and the downs that we have as young black men coming through, and all these pitfalls that they have. And one of them is that understanding that you're going to have to be better out here. That's just the bottom line. There's no way around it. You have to be better. And that starts with, get into education. Yes, that starts with your mentality, your attitude, but then it also goes over to, how you carry yourself. That's, as old people used to say, how you carry yourself. But that's your professionalism, and a lot of these young people just don't have professionalism because they've never really had to have it before. So
And I think they don't, many of them don't even value it. They think that it's obsolete. It's not.
yeah.
But I think that they don't realize that. They do a number of things that people of my generation would just say, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you didn't know that that would have some negative repercussion, if not tomorrow, down the road. But that seems to not be of interest or concern.
Well, the first thing I've definitely got to say before I forget, I don't want to forget this, is this has been one of the most informative, engaging conversations I've had in a long time with you. I mean, because you're going to have me doing a whole lot of research in the next few days, because just your conversation and some of the people that that you kind of pointed us toward, this is going to be, some good stuff. But I wanted to put that in there in case we start wrapping up, and I didn't want to forget that. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh no, I mean I don't have anything else. I mean I also think it's been a great conversation. I've actually learned something, and anytime I can learn something, that's a good day for me.
Good.
That's a good day. I gain a lot of value from what you've spoken about today.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awareness is everything.
Absolutely.
It is.
So before we
It
get
really
out
is.
of here or anything else, tell that camera about your book and where they can find it.
Okay, so teaching with diversity and cultural competence in mind, using popular culture text to teach social justice is available on Amazon for $19.99. And I'm delighted today to give you some information about who we are and what we do. We're an educational consulting group that works with local schools and local school systems, public and private, to bring about academic growth and development for students. And how we do this is through our customizable workshops and courses. With our standard scrutiny workshop, our consultants work very closely with teachers to make sure that they understand the standards that they're asked to teach. And we completely deconstruct each standard and the elements within the standard. We really want to make sure that the teachers understand what the standard is asking students to be able to do.